Hey, this is Bruce Trujillo with another session at home for Indie 1023. Today, welcoming Digo, bassist for the Dublin based post punk band Fontaines D.C. Digo, where are you in the world today?
Hey, I'm in Paris actually, Paris, France.
Oh, nice. Well, very nice to chat with you from Denver, Colorado. Of course, talking A Hero's Death, the sophomore album released on the heels of the debut 2019 release Doggerel, in a way keeping up with the momentum of that introductory release to the world, but also allowing space for yourselves to breathe. But tell me some basic similarities and differences between writing the two albums, A Hero's Death and Doggerel.
Well, the first album was all written in Dublin, and I think it really reflects that. You know, we've got songs about characters in Dublin and places in Dublin, and the second album is very transient because we were moving around a lot, and it's not so specific like that. Um, it's more kind of introverted and internal because I think we kind of turned in upon ourselves. Having been touring for back then when we were touring a lot, kind of
Mhm.
became quite introverted.
And there is a certain amount of spaciousness within A Hero's Death. As you said, a lot of these tunes were written while on tour supporting Doggerel. Was that space almost in response to the nature of being on tour, just like in a van with the guys and the crew for weeks on end? And so you kind of felt you needed that space?
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to say. Yeah, we were definitely listening to a lot of slower music and a lot of more calming music in the van to kind of chill ourselves out.
That's fair.
Because we were kind of neglecting that aspect of ourselves with our lifestyle,
Right.
and
Yeah. Tour is like brutal, like.
yeah, very chaotic actually, and very dramatic. The only more dramatic job I've ever had was working in a bar.
Also, yeah, that's except for you can like go home and kind of rest after the night and throughout the day. But with tour, you're on the road while you're supposed to be resting technically. Um, but a lot of reviews for A Hero's Death say there's also a lot of growth shown within the writing. What would you say you learned between the recording of Doggerel and A Hero's Death?
Um, well, we got to become full-time musicians when we were recording our second album, or sorry, writing our second album. You know, when we wrote our first one, we were still working our day jobs. So we were able to totally commit to being musicians, and through that, we learned a lot about our instruments and about effect pedals and tones and different things, arranging songs, and it really, to me, ramped up all of our individual abilities to do things, and I think that's why our second album has kind of a bit more depth of sound to it, and it's less dry and stuff like that, you know. And also, uh, I think I learned I got this instrument called a bass six, which is like a six string bass, and I used that a lot on the second album, and that's something I didn't use at all on the first album, so that's definitely something I learned.
Well, and you guys used the same producer for this sophomore album, but you guys went into the studio like with the intention of being, I don't want to say a little bit more professional, but a little bit more professional. So tell me about kind of working with the same crew on this one, but kind of with a different intention going into it.
Well, it's funny. We tried to record that first time with Nick Launay in California, in Sunset Sound in LA,
Mm.
and actually that was a really cool experience. And it's like an amazing studio, but the songs didn't come out as we wanted them to, and it was really crazy to think that you can work with such a great producer and engineer and in such a great studio and not get what you need, not get the songs as they should be. So it really gave us a new appreciation for what Dan and Lexi can do and what their studio brings, because their studio, it's so small and intimate, but also rough around the edges, and it's very chaotic, and it's very like everyone's in the room together recording together, so it makes it feel very live, and it's very hot in there as well because there's no windows. So it just gives you a sense of like we need to do this now, because I think a part of you is like on a fundamental level going, I need to get out of this room, like I need to get some air.
Well, we're kind of here in the midst of an unexpected breather, of course, with the global pandemic. A Hero's Death released earlier this summer. How have you taken releasing an entire album and kind of sitting with it without having to go out on tour and everything that now goes into releasing music?
Oh, it's really weird. We didn't get to play the songs to anyone. We've just written this album, and then that's it. I mean, when the release day came around, people were like, "Oh, congratulations, your album is out." I was like, "Is it?" It's kind of like this ghost has appeared online, like on Spotify and on YouTube, and it's supposed to represent that our album is out, as opposed to last year. We very much felt in our real life, in reality, that it was out because we were going around touring it and giving the physicals to people, or people giving them to us and asking them to sign them or whatever it was, selling t-shirts. But it just was real life. It was reality. And now it's just this abstract concept of like of it being out, and it's very strange. And I think it's going to be weird because if we do go like we're in a second lockdown here in France right now, but I think if things keep going the way they're going, we'll probably have our third album written before we get to play our second album live.
That is such a weird feeling to have, I feel like. Well, and listening to music also during the pandemic, it's like, this is great. This is getting me through it. But not being able to go and see live music and like celebrate with a band is very, very interesting. And so, yeah, third album potentially coming out before going on a tour for this one. Would you see something like a tour that combined the two of them, or would you want to really focus on A Hero's Death before the next album?
I have no idea. Like that's I couldn't tell you. It's just such a crazy concept. I don't know.
That's fair. All right. As a bassist, you are providing the backbone for each song, kind of setting up the subconscious mood of the tune. How do you approach adding the bass line to songs and providing a feel to complement or contrast Grian's lyrics? Grian Chatton, of course, vocalist for Fontaines D.C.
Well, I just try and uh, serve the song as best as I can and fit the role that's needed. If there's a song that needs a more melodic line, I'll play more melodic line like television screens. But in a song like A Hero's Death, for example, Green had a lot of that written, and uh, it had this descending riff, but like something about the descending riff with the bass line as well descending, it seemed like it made me feel a bit nauseous or something, and a little bit like this weird, like sick of the 50s feeling. I don't know. And I just thought it would be so much cooler to just play one note over and over again and just make it this really weird drone. And so, yeah, and then it just locks in with the drums. And I suppose just trying to creatively be a bit creative in the way you approach the instrument itself, and not be afraid of playing something as simply, or as simply if it needs to be played simply, or complicated if it needs to be complicated. But I know that the bass six was really fun for me this album because I got to really expand what the bass does in the band, like, and yeah, it was really cool.
I'm a fellow bassist, so I got to know more bass questions. What was one of the more challenging tunes to write your part for, especially given like you have an expanded bass guitar on this album?
Oh, well, Sunny is actually the intro, and that is actually bass six, and all the chords through it are bass six. So that's me playing it,
Ooh.
and
Uh,
it's actually quite difficult to play and sing at the same time. But um, yeah, no, that was really rewarding to be able to do it, but quite tricky, like,
will that be one that you think
for
you'll
sure.
include on like a live set list, or is that maybe one that just stays on the album?
I'd love to play it live, but we'll definitely need to practice it.
Right. So I watched a video of a walkthrough of the album that you guys just put out and loved hearing about how many of these tunes came from just jamming before a show or playing around with an old line that you guys had from before. Would you say that's kind of the norm for your guys' writing style, or are you guys able to kind of come together and do things as a whole band?
It's strange, we had an idea of what was our normal writing style when we lived in Dublin. We'd come in and we'd kind of maybe have a small idea, or be it on guitar or bass or a vocal lyric. And basically, when we're in the room, we're just having a big long discussion about what the song should be about, what this song needs, like the emotion of the song, where it should go. And it's five guys sitting down, mostly talking, and then we'll play and we'll see if those parts and what we can play lives up to those conversations. Um, and that's what we thought our writing style was. But then we were kind of forced into touring, and it became this thing of like writing on the road, and Whoever was staying in a hotel room with each other or happened to be there at that backstage at that time was the two or three who were working on these songs, and then we brought them in and tried to finish them. But it's weird because now we're in this new stage of lockdown and being separated from each other. We've all been working on these songs individually, and we've been trying to arrange them as much as we can without the others. So we all have these songs that are pretty finished, and we never really did that before. And so now we're coming back to jamming with each other like we jammed, and so it'll be cool but challenging as well, because I think there's probably more ego involved.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting coming back after writing solo. And what an interesting progression too, coming from like writing all together at once to kind of piecing it together and then solo. So we'll see how this third album sounds like when you guys get around to it, hopefully sooner than later. Not that we're sick of a hero's death yet or anything like that. But Digo, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Have a good one.